What happened during the Commissioner's Cup final? What were some of the biggest trades that happened last week in the NBA? What happened with Barcelona signing this young forward? And how are Orlando Norris and McLaren doing? Let's talk about it. Hello everyone, welcome back to a brand new episode of Ball Talk with Chanel. We have a lot to talk about this week. We've had the Commissioner's Cup final, we've had some NBA free agency frenzy, we've had the Club World Cup happening, we've had Formula One. So we are going to talk about all of that in this episode. So, like always, this episode is going to be split into 4 sections. In the first section, we're going to be discussing the WNBA. We're going to be discussing the Commissioner's Cup final, a trade that's happened that shocked everyone, as well as give some updates on CBA negotiations. In the second section, we're going to be talking about the NBA. Now, the regular season did end a while ago. The postseason ended, but we have had some free agency frenzy. So we're going to be talking about some free agency signings as well as some trades that I think has shocked a lot of people. In the third section, we are going to be talking about soccer. Now, we are in the middle of Club World Cup, so we will be recapping what has happened so far. And then we're going to be talking about a signing that truly has shocked everyone. And then in the last section, we will be talking about Formula One. We had the Austrian Grand Prix last weekend, so we will be recapping the race and we will be recapping the standings. So, with all that being said, let's get started. So, starting with the first section, the WNBA. Now, like I mentioned before, we had the Commissioner's Cup final, we have CBA negotiations, we have a trade to go through, but let's start first with the Commissioner's Cup final. Now, beforehand, I did think that the Lynx were going to win. Okay, I thought this was going to be a domination game. I thought that Nafisa was going to come up huge, dropping 30-40 points. And then when I heard the news that Caitlin Clark was going to be out for the Commissioner's Cup final with her lingering left groin injury, I thought, yes, the Lynx are going to win. This is a secured win. There's just nothing that the Fever was going to do. And boy, was I wrong. The Fever, even without Caitlin Clark, completely dominated and won 74-59. And this complete domination can be accredited to 2 players. The first player I want to talk about is Aaliyah Boston, who was dominant in the paint. She was able to kick it out to players on the outside. She was able to drive to the basket, really use her strength. She had such a great game. She did end the game with 12 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 steals, and a block. She shot 5 of 15 from the field, and she was perfect from the free throw line. So, you can just see from there, maybe the efficiency from the field is not necessarily there, but just the stats in itself with 12, 11, 6, 2, 1 can show you how good of a game Aaliyah Boston had. And now the second player I want to look at is Natasha Howard, because she came up huge for the team, both offensively and defensively. Now, from the offensive standpoint, she completely helped out Aaliyah Boston, okay, with the scoring. She ended the game with 16 points, 12 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 steals. And she shot 4 of 10 from the field, and she was also perfect from the free throw line. And now, that's just from the offensive perspective. From the defensive perspective, she completely locked down Nafisa. Nafisa truly struggled offensively. Nafisa did end the game with 12 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals, and a block. She shot 6 of 18 from the field, and she shot 0 of 2 from 3. Now, from the grand scheme of things, especially from the stats, she didn't do the worst. But this isn't the Nafisa Collier that we are used to. This isn't MVP like everyone has been saying. This isn't the same Nafisa that would drop 25, 30, even 40 points in a game. I mean, Natasha Howard completely shut her down. And now with her offensive game being off, no other player was really able to step up. Now, I will say, though, that Alana Smith did end up having such a good game because she did end the game with 15 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 assists. So I will say she did have a solid game. But The Minnesota Lynx' struggles during the Commissioner's Cup final was especially what I was talking about in episode 1. So you can go check it out, but I'm just going to recap here and kind of talk about it in brief. Which is this. If Napheesa Collier is struggling offensively, who is there to take over for her? Okay, and this is why I don't think that the Lynx can be a top team in the league for the entire season. I think they can be a top 5 team. They can even be a top 3 team. But I think just being that number 1 ranked team in the league is going to be hard for them because, like I mentioned before, if Napheesa Collier is struggling, who is there to take over for her? Okay, because Kayla McBride during the Commissioner's Cup final didn't do anything. Courtney Williams during the Commissioner's Cup final couldn't do anything. Like I mentioned before, the only one who had a really good game was Alana Smith. And even then, she was not able to show up offensively the same way that Napheesa does with every other game. And so, I think that if the Lynx really want to be competitive and really want to be a top team in the league, they need to figure out a way of how to get other players going if Napheesa is struggling. Because at least for the Fever, even though Caitlin Clark is the main driver of the offense, right? A lot of the plays runs through her. If she is out, which she currently is and has been for just about half the season, at least the offense runs through Aaliyah Boston and the Fever are perfectly fine. If the same thing happens with Napheesa, where she is either hurt or she is just struggling offensively, who is there to step up? The Lynx, I don't think, have figured that out, and I think that's why they struggled during especially the Commissioner's Cup final, because Napheesa struggled offensively, no one else stepped up. So congratulations to the Fever. I'm glad that they've won, and I think the Lynx really should use that opportunity to think about how they can run plays through players such as Alana Smith, through Courtney Williams, through Kayla McBride, even through Satu Sabali, right? Having those players really get heavily involved and allowing them to take over if Napheesa is struggling. Now, moving away from talks about the Commissioner's Cup final, let's talk about the latest trade that has happened that I think is truly shocking. So, the Dallas Wings have traded for NaLyssa Smith to the Las Vegas Aces for a second-round pick. And this is shocking for 2 reasons, okay? For the first one, of course, you are separating the WNBA power couple that is NaLyssa Smith and Dejanay Carrington. Now, they have been playing on separate teams for the longest. They finally got reunited and are able to play together in Dallas, and now they're getting separated again. Okay, so I think that in itself has broken a lot of people's hearts. But what I will say with the second reason, though, is that even though NaLyssa Smith is struggling right now, it doesn't mean she's going to struggle for the entire season. What do I mean by this? NaLyssa Smith, as of right now, she is struggling offensively, okay? Now, just from her stats, she is averaging 7 points, 5 rebounds, and an assist. So, yes, is she doing the greatest right now? No. But let's look at her previous seasons, especially when she was playing with the Indiana Fever. Last season, she averaged 11 points and 7 rebounds. And the season beforehand, she averaged 16 points and 9 rebounds. So, even though NaLyssa Smith is struggling right now, doesn't mean that she's going to struggle in the second half of the season. Maybe the first season was just a readjustment to new team, new players, and really ensuring that she has a solid role on the team. Now, NaLyssa Smith is a great player. She is someone that shows up for you both on the offensive end and on the defensive end as well. Now, I do think that if I was Dallas, even though she is struggling right now, I would have waited until the second half of the season. Because, again, you never know if she is going to step it up and actually step up her game in the second half of the season. As just an example, look at what happened with Caitlin Clark last year as a rookie. Okay, she was struggling in the first half, And in the second half, as soon as she got settled and she understood her team and she understood what she needed to do, she was golden. She was dropping 30 points a game. So I feel like the Dallas Wings needed to at least give NaLyssa that chance and give her that opportunity to grow with the team. So I do think that the Wings did make a big mistake with this. I think the Aces are absolutely going to have an advantage with NaLyssa Smith, really allowing her to help out Asia and Jackie Young, both on the offensive and defensive end. And I don't know what Dallas was truly thinking with this trade. And I don't think that this is something that they would look proudly upon in the future. So, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe NaLyssa Smith will struggle for the rest of the season. I don't know. But just from watching her previously in the previous seasons, you can see that she is truly a good player. And I do think she is going to step it up in the second half of the season. But like I said before, let's see what happens. Now, before we move on to the next section, we need to talk about the CBA negotiations. So, if you did not know, the WNBA players back in November opted out of their CBA, which, of course, to everyone else is not shocking whatsoever. So, they are currently in negotiations. And so, apparently, according to reports, the league have sent the players their first initial offer and their first initial proposal, and the players have rejected it. Now, although there are no specifics out there as to what exactly the league proposed, we do know what the reactions were from the players. As an example, Liberty star Breanna Stewart spoke briefly about the initial proposal and said that it was basically very frustrating and that the league has ignored everything that they have asked for. So, to understand both sides' arguments and to understand everything, let's provide a little bit of context. So, last season, the WNBA had a revenue of $200 million, which is more than 3 times the revenue from previous seasons. Last year was especially such a huge year for the WNBA. What's also important to note is that the WNBA has a new broadcasting deal set to start next year with ESPN, NBC, and Amazon. Now, this deal is worth $2.2 billion and it's supposed to last for the next 11 years. So this means that the WNBA is going to be paid about $200 million per year. Now, with all of that context, let's look at the CBA from both sides' perspective. So let's start first with the players, okay? The players are looking mainly for 3 things. They're looking for an increase in revenue shares, an increase in player salaries, and improved conditions. So let's start first with revenue sharing and player salaries, because I think this is one where a lot of people, especially on social media, seem to really be confused about this. So as of right now, the revenue share for the WNBA player salaries is at 9%, which means that for the $200 million that they made in revenue last year, only 9% of it goes towards player salaries. Now, to provide it as a comparison to their male counterparts, when it comes to the NBA, the revenue sharing for player salaries is at 50%. And the league makes billions upon billions of dollars. So, you can do the math. What the players are looking for is an increase in the revenue sharing because in 2019, the revenue share for the WNBA was at 12%. So this means that the revenue share actually decreased, which resulted in a lower pay for these players. So what the players are now looking for is an increase in the revenue share that can be closer and closer to their male counterparts. Maybe not now at 50%, but even something like 15 to 20%. Increase in the revenue shares results in an increase in player salaries. Now, of course, with improved conditions, it means just improving the gym equipment and improving the courts, maybe even expanding to bigger courts now that the WNBA is becoming more and more popular, different things like that. Now, you can understand from the player's perspective why they're asking for this, okay? Like I mentioned before, the WNBA is growing in popularity. You have games that are sold out. You have games that are averaging over 1 million views, okay? They are starting to become extremely popular, and so the players want to be able to reap the benefits of that popularity. So this is what the players are looking for. Now let's look at this from the league's perspective. Now the league is going to be focusing on the loss that the league suffers every year. So to provide some context, even though the revenue that came in was at $200 million last year, like I said before, the league still lost $40 million in profits. Now, even though this is better than the year before, in which the league lost $50 million, a loss is still a loss, and it's still at tens of millions of dollars. So the league is going to be looking at that and effectively saying, okay, you want a higher increase in revenue sharing and in salaries, but we're still losing millions of dollars every year. So how exactly can we do that? And then also too, why would we increase the revenue sharing and the salaries if, let's say, for example, the WNBA stops being popular? Then what happens? Then we lose a lot more money than we already are losing right now. So now you understand the perspective from both sides. And ultimately, if they cannot come to a conclusion, there will be a lockout in the league. Now, a lockout is the worst case scenario for the WNBA and for the players. The players will be receiving little to no money while the WNBA is in a lockout. The league would not really make any money. And so it's just a really bad scenario for both sides. So that is the last thing that they want. And so hopefully they can come to a mutual agreement, something that would hopefully benefit both sides. And let's just see exactly what happens when the update comes. So now let's move on to the next section, which is all about the NBA. Now, like I mentioned before, the season has officially ended, and I've talked about that in my last episode. But last week, we have had such an NBA free agency frenzy. It's been insane, from free agency signings to trades that have happened that shocked everyone. So going through every single free agency signing and trade is just going to make this episode way longer than what it needs to be. So what I want to do for the sake of this episode is talk about 2 free agency signings and 2 trades that I think are important to talk about. So with that, let's talk about the free agency signings. So the first one I want to talk about is with Jordan Clarkson. Now, Jordan Clarkson did get a buyout of his contract with the Utah Jazz, ultimately become a free agent, and then he signed with the New York Knicks. Now, different reporters, such as Bleacher Report reporter Andy Bailey, gave this signing a B and talked about his lack of efficiency in the shooting and how much older he is. But I think that this is actually a good signing. I would rate this a B plus to an A minus. And the reason why is because Jordan Clarkson, even though he is older, it's not like he is 40 years old, right? Or even late 30s, where he's on the verge of retirement. He is still good enough where he can come in for someone like Jalen Brunson if Jalen Brunson either cannot play or he needs a break. Now, the Knicks did hire Mike Brown as their new head coach, and Mike Brown is not someone that doesn't believe in substitutions or anything else like that, similarly to what the complaints were about Tom Thibodeau. So what I will say is that you will see Jalen Brunson get a lot more breaks. And who is that person that can really come in for him? And that person can be Jordan Clarkson. He is a good offense facilitator. He is an efficient shooter. He shot 48% from the field last season. He's a great passer. He can really provide you with that same offense that Jalen Brunson provides. So if Jalen Brunson, let's say for example, he gets hurt, or if he just needs a break, then Jordan Clarkson can really fill in that gap for Brunson for the time being. And the Knicks would not drop their offense significantly. He would also be a great complement to players such as Josh Hart and Karl Anthony Towns and other players like that, where he can really be another scoring option, especially for when Jalen Brunson is out. So I think this was a really good signing by the Knicks, and I'm excited to see Jordan Clarkson play at Madison Square Garden next season. Now, the second free agency signing I want to talk about is DeAndre Ayton. Now, DeAndre did also get a buyout of his contract with the Portland Trailblazers and became a free agent, and then eventually signed with the Lakers on a 2-year deal. Now, the reason why I think this is a good signing is because he would fill in that gap of what the Lakers were missing. Now, last season, the Lakers struggled heavily in the paint. They struggled with getting points in the paint. They struggled getting boards. Like, you can just see that they did not have a solid center. Okay, Jackson Hayes was just not really cutting it for the team. And you especially saw this when the Lakers were playing the Minnesota Timberwolves during the playoffs. For context, Rudy Gobert dropped 27 points and 24 rebounds on the Lakers. And the reason why is because they did not have a center that could match up with him. And so he was able to dominate in the paint. And the Lakers basically could not stop him. Now, signing someone like DeAndre Ayton gives you that size, gives you the strength, gives you the defensive presence that the Lakers need in the paint. They needed someone that could match up with players such as Rudy Gobert, Nikola Jokic, or Karl Anthony Towns. Now you have that player that can provide that defense, give you some points in the paint, and someone that can really be that good, solid center for Luka, for LeBron, for the rest of the Lakers team. Now, Jackson Hayes could go and come in off the bench and get a couple of minutes here and there, but I think starting DeAndre Ayton is a good thing for the Lakers, and I think this is what's going to really boost their team for next season. Now, those are the free agency signings I want to talk about. Now let's look at two trades that I want to talk about. The first one I want to talk about is the Lonzo Ball and Isaac Okoro trade. So, if you didn't know, the Chicago Bulls traded Lonzo Ball to the Cleveland Cavaliers for Isaac Okoro. Now, let's look at this trade from both sides' perspective. Starting first with the Cleveland Cavaliers' perspective, this was a great move. When Lonzo Ball is healthy, this man is a solid 3-and-D guy. He has another scoring option, especially on the perimeter, and help out players such as Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. Even if he is coming off the bench, the Cavs' offense is not going to drop significantly. So I think this was such a great signing, and I think adding depth with players such as Lonzo, adding them to your roster is really going to help the Cavs push forward in the regular season, and especially if they want to make a series run in the postseason. Now, looking at this from the Chicago Bulls perspective, I think this is a pretty solid signing. I don't think Isaac Okoro is the worst player in the world. I think he is a good player that you can bring in off the bench. I don't think he's good enough to start over players such as Kobe White or Josh Giddey, but I do think that he is someone that if you need to give one of them a break, he will give you some quality minutes, he'll give you some quality points, quality scoring, and your offense is not going to drop significantly. So I understood from the Chicago Bulls perspective why they would want to sign him and why they would take him in. I do think, though, of the two teams, I think the Cavaliers benefited a lot more than the Bulls did, but I don't think this was a terrible trade. I think this is a pretty solid trade from both teams. Now, the second trade I want to talk about is between the Boston Celtics and the Portland Trail Blazers. So, the Boston Celtics traded guard Drew Holiday to the Portland Trail Blazers for Anthony Simons and 2 second-round picks. Now, looking at this from the Portland Trail Blazers perspective, this was a great move. Now, I know people's complaints are going to be, oh, Drew Holiday is 35 years old. He is just way too old. But look, even at 35 years old, he's a great scorer, he's a great offense facilitator, and he's a great defender. And on top of that, because he's older, he provides that veteran, that leadership that the Portland Trail Blazers need, especially because they still have young players such as Scoot Henderson and Donovan Clingan. And on top of that, Drew Holiday can mentor Scoot and really improve his game for after Drew goes and retires, Scoot can go and take over. So I think having Drew on a team with Scoot and Donovan will really improve the Portland Trail Blazers team. I think this was such a great asset. I think Drew Holiday is a great asset to any team that he is on, and I'm excited to see him and Scoot in the backcourt. Now, looking at this from the Celtics perspective, truthfully, I don't know exactly what they are doing. I don't know why they would want to trade such a great player like Drew Holiday for Anthony Simons. Anthony is not a better defender than Drew. He probably has the same shooting skills, maybe a little bit better than Drew. The only benefit that Anthony has over Drew is the fact that he is a lot younger. That's the only thing. But having him and Derek White in the backcourt honestly does not make any sense. I'm assuming that Anthony is going to be the shooting guard and Derek White is going to be the point guard and he's going to be the offense facilitator, which Derek White is not a great offense facilitator type of guy. I don't really know exactly what the Celtics are doing. I don't know if they want to actually trade Derek White or anything else. I don't know what the Celtics are thinking. But if they are going to keep Anthony Simons and Derek White in the backcourt, I think that was a grave mistake. I think that is something that's going to hinder the Celtics' performance for next season. I don't think that this was such a great move. Now, of course, I could be wrong. Maybe Derek White and Anthony Simons works a lot better than what I think. But just from the looks of it, I don't think that this was a good move from the Celtics. And I think that the Celtics are ultimately going to regret this decision. Before we continue, please be sure to check out the description box down below that gives you all of my social media pages. My TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook pages gives you little bits of tidbits, news, and scores, and reactions to everything that's happening with sports around the world. If you want to see what a day in the life with me looks like and what exactly I'm up to, you can follow my Snapchat, which is also in the description box down below. And if you want to see some quick reactions, some quick news that are being told, then you can go check out my Threads account and my X account. All of those accounts are all at balltalkwithchanel. Please be sure to check out the description box down below. If you are listening to this on Spotify, please be sure to follow this page so you do not miss a single episode. If you are watching this on YouTube, please be sure to hit that like button down below. Be sure to subscribe to this page and turn on notifications so you do not miss a single episode. Now let's move on to the next section, which is all about soccer. Now, like I mentioned in the beginning of this episode, we are in the middle of Club World Cup, so let's recap what has happened so far. So let's start first with Inter Miami. Now, Messi and Inter Miami did enter the round of 16, and they faced Messi's former team, PSG. Now, PSG completely swept Inter Miami, winning 4-0. Midfielder João Neves scored 2 goals for PSG in the first half. And then we had defender Achraf Hakimi, who scored a goal for PSG. And then Inter Miami's defender Tomas Aviles accidentally kicked the ball into his own goal. So by the end of the first half, the score was 4-0 PSG. And even though that ended the scoring for PSG for the rest of the match, Inter Miami was not able to make a comeback. They were not able to get a single goal scored. So PSG was officially moving on to the quarterfinals where they were going to face Harry Kane and Bayern Munich. Now, during this match, PSG also swept Bayern, winning 2-0. Desiree Doué scored the first goal of the match at the 78th minute. So you can see how much of a back and forth game it was for the entire time. And then Ousmane Dembele scored the last goal for PSG. And throughout this entire time, Harry Kane and Bayern Munich was just not able to score a single goal. They were not able to make this comeback. So Bayern was officially eliminated from Club World Cup, and PSG was moving on to the semifinals. Now, the next team I want to look at is Real Madrid. Now, they did make it to the round of 16 and they faced Juventus. Now, what's great about this match is the fact that forward Kylian Mbappe made his Club World Cup debut after being out for a while with an illness. And with this match, Real Madrid won 1-0 with forward Gonzalo Garcia scoring the one and only goal for the team, the one and only goal for the match. So, they moved on to the quarterfinals where they faced Dortmund Borussia, who was the team that Real Madrid actually faced in the Champions League final last year. What's also ironic about this is that this is midfielder Jude Bellingham's former team, and also too, this is the team that Jude's younger brother Job currently plays for. So this could have been the match where we saw the Bellingham brothers face off against each other. But Job ended up being suspended for this match, so we could not see the Bellingham brothers battle it out. Now, Real Madrid did win 3-2, and this was such a good match. Forward Gonzalo Garcia scored the first goal of the match, and then 10 minutes later, you had Fran Garcia, who scored the second goal of the match for Real Madrid. Now, towards the end of the second half of the match, forward Maximilian Bayer scored the first goal for Dortmund, and then this was followed by forward Kylian Mbappe, who scored his first goal in Club World Cup and made the score 3-1. And then afterwards, Serhou Guirassy actually scored a penalty goal for Dortmund. And although they were making this comeback and they were only down 1 goal, they unfortunately could not score again. Real Madrid escaped with the win, and they are heading off to the semifinals to face PSG. Now, the last team that I want to look at is Al Hilal, aka Neymar's former team. Now, they did make it to the round of 16, and they were to face Erling Haaland and Manchester City. Now, of course, everyone like me walked into this match thinking, oh, Man City is going to win easily. Like, this is just not going to be fair. This, that, and the third. And boy, were we all wrong. Was everyone stunned? Okay. Al Hilal ended up winning 4-3 in additional extra time, and they were moving on to the quarterfinals. So first, we have Bernardo Silva, who scored the very first goal of the match and the very first goal for Man City. And then we had Marcus Leonardo, who scored the first goal for Al Hilal to tie the game. And then midfielder Malcolm scored the second goal for Al Hilal, but then it was followed up by Man City forward Erling Haaland, who also went and tied it up at 2 apiece. And then we ended up going into extra time. Al Hilal player Kalidou Koulibaly scored a goal for Al Hilal, giving them the 3-2 lead. And then Man City player Phil Foden ended up tying it up. And then we had Marcus Leonardo for Al Hilal, who scored the last goal of the match and sealing the win for Al Hilal. Like I mentioned before, everyone was stunned. This was basically like a Cinderella story. Al Hilal was moving on and was going to face the Brazilian team Fluminense. Now, they did lose to Fluminense 2-1 in the quarterfinals, and that officially ended their run. Martinelli scored the first goal of the match and the first goal for Fluminense, and then Marcus Leonardo ended up tying it up for Al Hilal. And then Hercules went and scored another goal to give Fluminense the lead, and unfortunately Al Hilal was not able to recoup from it. So, Fluminense now is going to be moving on to the semifinals, where they will be facing Chelsea. So, that's enough Club World Cup talk for right now. Now I want to talk about a signing that truly has shocked everyone. So, to provide some context, Athletic Club forward Nico Williams was just not agreeing with the team, and he was just ready to move on, according to reports. Now, Barcelona was the first team to reach out, and according to reports, it seemed like there was really good conversation. There were a lot of terms that were agreed upon verbally, and everything just seemed to be heading in the right direction, where Nico would be heading to Barcelona. But then the big news dropped. Nico Williams signed a massive 10-year contract extension with Athletic Club, which would let him stay with the club until 2035. His release clause was increased from 60 million euros, which is what it was for his previous contract, to over 95 million euros. And on top of that, he is to be paid, according to reports, about 10 million euros per year. Now, this truly shocked everyone because everyone thought that Nico was going to be joining Barca. Now, the question is, why didn't Nico Williams sign with Barcelona? And according to reports, the answer comes all down to one clause in the agreement. They've agreed to everything else. Now, according to reports, Nico's representatives have asked for an exit clause in his contract that effectively said, if you are not able to register Nico, this is what we want. Now, the representatives have said that this is the same clause that Barcelona has added to their midfielder Dani Olmo. But Barcelona refused to add that clause into the contract. And so, Nico did not sign with them. Now, I think that this was a big mistake for Barcelona. I don't know why when it's such an easy clause to add into the contract of why Barcelona refused to add it in. I don't know if it's because of the current financial struggles that they are having, that they cannot afford to put that in. I don't know exactly what it is, but I think Barcelona made a really, really grave mistake in not being able to sign Nico Williams. He would have been such a great player to replace someone such as Rafinha or even Louis if they went and needed a break. So, one simple clause just completely collapsed the entire agreement, the entire negotiations. And I think that this is going to be something that Barcelona is going to think about for a very, very long time. So, with that, now let's move on to the last section, which is all about Formula One. So we've had the Austrian Grand Prix last weekend, and by the time this episode drops, we would have had the British Grand Prix, but I'm going to be talking about that in next week's episode. So let's recap what has happened in the Austrian Grand Prix. Now, McLaren's Lando Norris did win the Austrian Grand Prix, which did come as a big relief for him, because during the Canadian Grand Prix, Lando ended up crashing and was forced out of the race. So this is a nice bounce back from the last Grand Prix. Then right after him came Oscar Piastri, right, also on McLaren. Then after him was Charles Leclerc from Ferrari, and then after him was Ferrari's Lewis Hamilton. Both Max Verstappen and Carlos Sainz have struggled in this race, and they were forced out of this race. So let's start first with the drivers' standings. So Lando Norris was leading the drivers for quite some time in the first half of the season, but then Piastri actually jumped him in the standings. So now he is first in the standings with 216 points. And right after him, of course, is Norris with 201 points. And then right after him is Verstappen with 155 points. And right after him is George Russell with 146 points. And then in fifth is Lewis Hamilton with 119 points. Now, of course, when it comes to these standings, looking first at Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, they are not that far apart from each other, which means Lando Norris is only a race or two away from jumping Piastri and reclaiming that first place position. So it'll be interesting to see if Piastri is able to maintain that top position. Then also what I want to look at is Verstappen and George Russell, where Verstappen is only leading by less than 10 points, which means George Russell only needs to win maybe one or two races to be able to jump Verstappen. So it will be interesting, especially with the British Grand Prix and the Belgian Grand Prix, to see if George Russell is able to jump Verstappen in the standings. And now let's look at the constructors. Now McLaren does have a big lead ahead of everyone else with 417 points. And then right below them is Ferrari, who is in second with 210 points. And then right underneath them is Mercedes with 209 points. So you can also see with Ferrari and Mercedes how they are only 1 point away, which also means that George Russell and Antonelli just need to win and be ahead of Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton in one, maybe two more races, and they will be able to jump Ferrari. So it will be interesting, right, with the next couple of Grand Prix that are coming up, right, like I mentioned before, the Belgian, Hungarian ones, etc., to see exactly how the standings kind of shake up. So it would be interesting to see what happens. So that is all for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to tune in next Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time so you can stay all caught up in sports. See you next week. Bye.